Every evening, everything happened the same way. He came home around 6, took off his coat, and placed his shoes by the door, neatly, as always. The house smelled neutral, a little like vanilla, a little like laundry. It used to smell like fried onions and fresh pastries. Now it smelled like air freshener with the scent of clean laundry. Ben went to the kitchen, where Kat was sitting at her laptop, finishing something for her school. She taught history, and in the evenings she graded teenagers' essays, complaining that they don't know how to write sentences longer than 3 words. "Hi," he said. "Hi," she replied, without looking up from the screen. "What's for dinner?" "In the fridge. Heat it up." He nodded silently and put the container in the microwave. A metallic hum, the click of the door, a buzzing sound. He ate alone at the table, while she was still typing. Then he washed the dishes, dried his hands with a towel, and looked at her, tired, closed off, distant. Once upon a time they could chat for hours. They could laugh until they cried over silly jokes. Now their conversations were reduced to a list of things to do. Buy milk, make a dentist appointment for their son, call the insurance company. And then bed. He lay down next to her, gently hugged her shoulders, felt her body under her pajamas. "Kat, maybe," he began, quietly, almost uncertainly. "Not tonight, Ben. My head is splitting. I understand." He rolled onto his back and stared at the ceiling. He heard her fall asleep, turning away toward the wall. Sometimes he whispered to himself, "It's okay, she's just tired, it's just a phase." But this phase had been going on for almost a year. Sometimes he would get up in the middle of the night, go out onto the porch, and stand under the stars for a long time, listening to trucks passing by on the highway somewhere in the distance. Quiet, steady. There was something alive in those sounds, unlike the silence inside the house. He tried to remember when it all started to fall apart. Maybe after the second child. Maybe when she started working more. Or maybe time erases not only feelings, but also the desire to touch. He loved her, still. But love now felt more like a habit, like a cup of coffee every morning. You can't do without it, but the taste no longer brings joy. And yet, he waited. Every evening, he waited for her to turn around, put her hand on his chest, and say, "I'm sorry, I'm just tired. I want to be with you." But that didn't happen. And the next morning, it all repeated itself. Coffee, work, evening, fatigue, silence. He met her by chance, as it usually happens, at a corporate party to celebrate the completion of a project. The venue was standard, a restaurant near the office with cheap garlands and loud music. Everyone was drinking, laughing, someone was filming stories. Ben sat a little apart, drinking beer, trying not to linger. He wanted to go home, not because he was waiting for someone, but simply out of habit. Her name was Melissa. She was new to the finance department. She had slightly curly hair, light eyes, and a simple, genuine smile. She approached him first. "You're Ben, right?" she said, holding a glass of wine. "I guess so," he smiled. "And you are?" "Melissa. We corresponded about the report." He remembered. Short, dry letters, without emotion. But in real life, she turned out to be different. Easygoing, attentive, a little mocking. They started talking. About music, about vacations, about life in the suburbs, about how hard it is to get up on Mondays. Then she laughed and said, "You must be one of those men who always has everything under control." He shrugged. "If not me, then who?" Something flashed in her eyes, not flirtation, but rather interest. And in that moment, he suddenly caught himself thinking that he hadn't felt this way in a long time, as if she really saw him. Not just as a husband, father, or colleague, but as a man. A week later, they went to lunch, for work. Then again. Then just to take a walk, get some fresh air. The conversations grew longer. There were pauses between words where there had been politeness before. Once she touched his hand while adjusting his jacket sleeve. Nothing special. But he remembered that touch all evening. He hadn't planned anything. He didn't want to betray anyone. But something clicked inside him, quietly, almost imperceptibly. When she wrote to him one day, "You look tired today. Is everything okay?" He stared at the screen for a long time. And instead of the standard, "Everything's fine," he typed. "Not really. It's just hard at home. It's complicated to explain." That's how what later became his second life began. She listened, didn't interrupt, didn't judge. She was just there, through the screen, through short messages. Sometimes that was enough to breathe. And when one evening she suggested meeting, just for coffee after work, he didn't say no. During the day, he lived a normal life. So normal that at times he felt like a character from an advertising brochure, a smiling father of a family, living in a suburban house with a well-kept lawn and neighbors' dogs behind the fence. He got up at 6:30, made coffee, toasted bread, and woke up the children. Kat appeared in the kitchen with her phone in her hand, scrolling through the news. "Good morning," he said. "Yeah," she replied distractedly. They ate without looking at each other. Then the cars drove out of the garage, 2 silver ones, as boring as their conversations. At work, Ben became confident, calm, predictable again. The one everyone went to for advice, the one who always had everything under control. No one guessed that in the evenings he deleted messages and hid his phone away from the kitchen so that the screen wouldn't light up when she was nearby. He and Melissa texted each other every day. Briefly, cautiously. Nothing seemed forbidden, but every word conveyed a closeness that was too personal to be just friendly. Sometimes it was a photo of a cup of coffee, sometimes a phrase, "Thinking of you." He tried to convince himself that it was just support, that there was nothing wrong with it. But one evening after work, they found themselves in her car. Rain drummed on the roof, the city glowed with neon lights outside the windows. She looked at him, without asking for permission. And he kissed her. Without preparation, without words. Simply because he couldn't do otherwise. Then he was silent for a long time. "This is a mistake," he finally said. "Maybe," she replied. "But sometimes mistakes are the only thing that reminds us that we're alive." He drove home with a heavy heart. Everything in the house was as usual, quiet, peaceful. Kat was watching a TV series, the children were asleep. He stood in the bedroom doorway and thought, if only she would look at me now, if only she could see. But she didn't look. Since then, everything has gone down 2 different paths. During the day, routine, family, dinner, conversations about bills. At night, correspondence, anticipation, a burning sense of guilt that strangely coexisted with excitement. Sometimes, lying next to his wife, he would replay Melissa's morning messages in his head and feel everything inside him get confused. Love and lies, habit and passion. He knew that if everything came out, he would lose everything. But returning to the former emptiness seemed scarier than living with this secret. One evening, while sorting through things in the basement, he stumbled upon an old box with the words, "Cat plus Ben/old life," written on it in marker. He didn't remember what was inside, but he opened it anyway. Dust, the smell of cardboard, and on top, a stack of photographs yellowed at the edges. In the first one, they were together. Lake Michigan, August, the sun at its zenith. Kat is wearing shorts and a white t-shirt, laughing with her head thrown back. He is standing next to her, his hair wet, his arm around her waist. They are probably 23. Young, confident, as if life were endless. Ben sat down on the concrete floor, holding the photo in his hands, looking at it for a long time. There she is, the old Kat. The one who woke up in the morning, lay down on top of him and whispered, "You know you're my life." And he believed her. Back then, everything was simple. There were no fears, no fatigue, no exhausting days. He remembered their first home, a tiny apartment in Chicago with peeling walls and a cheap sofa. They ate pizza out of a box, laughed, argued, made up. They loved each other. No schedules, no reservations. Now everything was right and therefore dead. The house was like something out of a magazine, but inside there was only an echo. He caught himself thinking that even the photos on the walls weren't alive. Everything was from a long time ago. It was as if he and Kat had frozen somewhere in their youth and then simply continued to move their bodies without their souls. He wanted to show her the box and say, "Look, do you remember us?" But he didn't. What would she say? Yes, there was a time? And then go back to the bedroom with her phone, saying she was tired? He put the photo on the kitchen table. In the morning, Kat saw it, picked it up, looked at it for a couple of seconds, and said quietly, "Oh, young." "Yes," he replied. "And happy." She smiled mechanically without warmth. "We're no worse off now, Ben. That's just life." He nodded, though inside he felt a tightness. Because he knew, no, it wasn't like that. He didn't want another woman. He wanted this one back, the one in the photo. The one who could laugh for no reason and whisper in his ear that everything was ahead of them. When he went to bed that night, the photo was still lying on the nightstand. He stared at it for a long time in the dark, as if trying to breathe the past back into the present. But the photo remained just a piece of paper. And next to him slept the woman who had once been his dream, but now was just part of his routine. Everything looked normal. A large walnut table, neat plates, children arguing about who would wash the dishes. Kat in her blue sweater, her hair tied back in a bun. She was telling her daughter something about school, smiling, nodding. Ben listened, nodding in response, but his mind was somewhere else. Everything is perfect when viewed from the outside. But inside it's like glass. Transparent but fragile. One awkward word and it will shatter. "How was your day?" he asks. "Fine," she replies without looking up. He waits for her to continue, but she doesn't. She cuts vegetables, then puts them in a bowl and adds dressing. Everything is done out of habit like a machine. He tries to start a conversation. "Remember when we used to go to Wisconsin?" "Hom. That was a long time ago. Maybe we should go again? Just for the weekend." "I don't know. Now's not the time." He wants to ask, when will it be the time? But he doesn't say it. Instead, he puts down his fork and looks out the window. It's November, wet snow, gray sky. He remembers how once, many years ago, they argued about who would cook dinner, then suddenly both started laughing and hugged each other right in the middle of the kitchen. Back then, everything seemed simple. Now every word is an effort. The phone on his lap vibrates slightly. He knows who is texting. Melissa. He feels his heart beating faster, but he doesn't reach for the phone. It's torture. Being here and knowing that somewhere someone is waiting for him, listening to him, wanting him. Kat suddenly asks, without looking up. "You're quiet today. Did something happen?" He sighs. "No. Just tired." She nods, as if accepting it as fact. And again, silence. Only the sound of forks and dishes. Just an ordinary family on an ordinary evening. He looks at her, the very woman who once knew his every thought, every wrinkle on his face. Now there is a glass wall between them. He sees her, but he can't reach her. When she goes to the bedroom, he stays at the table, finishes his wine, and opens his phone. "Where are you?" Melissa texts. He looks at the screen, then turns it off. He can't do it today. He doesn't want to become the person he becomes when he's with her. He goes to the bedroom and lies down next to Kat. She's already asleep. He stares at the ceiling and thinks, maybe tomorrow everything will change. Maybe she'll wake up different. Maybe we'll be us again. But he knows that tomorrow will be the same. And only hope, so stubborn, continues to live in him, like a weak fire that won't go out, but hardly gives off any heat. He woke up before everyone else. It was just dawn outside, and the air smelled of coffee and cold. Kat was sleeping next to him, turned toward the wall. Her breathing was even and calm. There was no trace of anxiety on her face. He lay there, looking at her back, and thought how strange everything had turned out. Two people under one roof, sharing everything, bills, space, even children, but not sharing their lives. He loved her. Yes, in his own way, without passion, without heat. But still, he loved her. The way you love an old house where the floorboards creak, but where you know every corner. He wanted her back. Not because he was afraid of loneliness, but because he remembered how she used to be. And how they used to be together. He got up, made coffee, and went out onto the porch. Snow was falling quietly on the street, on the parked cars, on their lawn, which had long since ceased to look perfect. The world was quiet, almost silent. The phone flashed again. A message from Melissa. "Where are you? Is everything okay?" He stared at the screen for a long time. Then he turned off his phone. For the first time in a long time, he didn't want to answer. He was tired of being in between. Between who he was and who he had become. Maybe it would all end badly. Maybe Kat would find out, leave, and destroy what was left. Or maybe they would just go on living, close but not together, until the children grew up and the house was empty. But deep down, somewhere beneath all that ashes, he still believed. He believed that one day she would look at him for real. Not as a neighbor, not as a partner in everyday life, but as the man with whom she once dreamed of a future. Sometimes in the evening, he would sit by the bed and play old songs, the ones they used to dance to in the kitchen, barefoot, with a glass of wine, laughing, not thinking about tomorrow. Kat might walk by, glance briefly, but sometimes she would stop. She would just listen. In those moments, it was as if a crack appeared in the air, through which something alive broke through. He understood that things might never be the same again. People change. Love changes too. But if even a speck of that light remained, he was willing to wait. Not for the sake of a perfect family. Not for the sake of habit. But for her sake, the one who was still somewhere deep inside. He got up, walked over to the bed, and covered Kat with a blanket. Then he said quietly, almost in a whisper, "Good morning, Kat." She mumbled something and turned to face him. And in that moment, brief, almost imperceptible, he saw something in her eyes that he hadn't seen in a long time: warmth. A small spark. Not the past, but perhaps the beginning of something new.